with youth, orphaned youth, and social orphans. That is one problem that we'll be trying to address with our organization. Thank you to Lua for her speech. Now to speak about the work of American institutions in Moldova is my former boss, actually. Jeff Clark served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Bahrain from 1976 to 1978. And then after returning, he spent many years at the Snohomish County Administration. Then he returned to Peace Corps, serving as country director in Moldova for 4 years, 2005 to 2009. And he now serves as deputy director of Snohomish Health District. And I happen to know he's a great Frisbee player. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Clark.
Thank you, Greg. It's good to have so many people here tonight to hear and talk about Moldova. When I arrived in Moldova in 2005, after finding out where it was, I was welcomed by Ambassador Heather Hodges, United States Ambassador to Moldova at that time. Ambassador Hodges had served in a number of embassies around the world. She had served in South America, Central America, across Europe. But when she talked to the embassy employees, the Americans in Moldova, she talked to them about something she called Club Moldova. She said that no place that she had ever served ever developed such a commitment by the American embassy officials towards the host country as Moldova did. That in other countries, the embassy officials tended to represent American interests. That's kind of what the president sends you there for. But in Moldova, we got there and we began to get to know the people, got to know their talents, their abilities, and the great challenges that they faced. And before long, Ambassador Hodges felt we had joined what she called Club Moldova. And she said we would never leave Club Moldova. Clearly, Greg and Sophia and Jason and myself and the other volunteers, former volunteers who are here tonight, are still members of Club Moldova. I want to talk a bit about what that has done in terms of having American efforts to try to help this small country in Eastern Europe. A little background on some of the poverty that you saw and some of the dissolution of families that you saw in the shows and that you've heard about today. 20 years ago, the country became independent after many centuries of domination by various empires. But there was a very short period of time, about half a dozen years, before the Russian economy collapsed, the late 1990s, fell completely apart. But in that time period, Moldova did not have a chance to develop its own independent economy. It was still very closely tied to the Soviet Union, which it had been part of for 50 years. It had been a wine producer for the rest of the Soviet Union for all that time. It had the advantage of a monopoly. It could make whatever it wanted. It would be sold across the Soviet Union. Suddenly, the Soviet Union was gone and Russia's economy was dead. Well, when the Russian economy caught the flu, the Moldovan economy went on life support. And it's never really recovered from that. As I traveled across the country for 4 years to visit volunteers and host families and schools, I saw countless buildings that were half finished when the economy fell apart. And 15 years later, they still sit there unfinished. I saw countless farm buildings built of concrete where the only thing left was the concrete. All the wiring had been stripped out, all the metal had been stripped out, all the windows had been stripped out by people desperate to sell anything they could to make a living through the long, difficult years since the Russian economy collapsed. So there have been enormous financial reasons why this country has been left the way that it has been left. It's important to remember that Moldova sits on the boundary line between East and West, between the European Union to the west and a rebuilding Russia to the east. Both sides would really like Moldova to be part of their side. And the American embassy and the European embassies have been working very hard, along with a lot of NGOs, to try to develop the types of social structures, the type of legal structures that would move Moldova increasingly towards the west and provide more economic and social freedoms for the people that live there. The American embassy has pushed a lot of anti-trafficking, anti-human trafficking initiatives, and the European embassies have done the same thing. We've tried to strengthen the rule of law in Moldova. So, for example, giving aid and advice to the Ministry of Justice and to the criminal justice system so that human traffickers, when they are caught, cannot pay money to get off and go back to their business. The Millennium Challenge is an effort by the American government started under the Bush administration to try to send large amounts of money to countries which are considered to be on the brink, to have the ability to go in the right direction with proper investment. Several $100 million of American dollars have been committed to the country of Moldova to help repair basic infrastructure, mainly roads and agricultural facilities. The thought is, this is a country that can grow a lot of goods, a lot of produce. It's a country that can make a lot of goods, but if they can't move those goods out to the European markets, they won't be able to sell them. So the American effort is to invest in basic infrastructure so that when businesses develop, they can actually market their goods elsewhere. USAID has worked in many, many ways in Moldova to try to help Moldovans build businesses with modern free market enterprise principles so that they can develop those businesses and they can train people in marketable skills. And that's affected a lot of Moldovans throughout the country. There are non-governmental organizations, NGOs, from across Europe and